Alternate Worlds here, back with another video, and I do have what if Izuku was sent to the Pokemon verse part 2. So hopefully you guys did enjoy part 1. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on another new video. But with all that being said, let's begin. So back when I was saying in part 1, Izuku would end up finding himself a Nidoran, a female Nidoran, as Izuku had seen this in books and would know the evolution to this. He would end up fighting it and capturing it with Bulbasaur, as Bulbasaur and Izuku's bond would grow even deeper, as those two have started to become quite close, as now Ash would send out Nidoran and try to form a bond with it just like it did with Bulbasaur. But in this case, it would seem to be a lot harder than it was with Bulbasaur, as Bulbasaur was way more cooperative than Nidoran. But through persistence and, well, basically determination, Izuku would end up trying to form a bond with it. And it would end up working, as Izuku would show its compassion and kindness and caring nature toward Nidoran, as Nidoran, well, this Nidoran in particular has such a warm and kind nature that it would end up warming up to Ash, forming somewhat of a small bond, though it will grow soon in the future. But we move on. As they did start forming a bond, Izuku would end up taking out his Pokédex and basically checking out what moves Nidoran has. And it quite impressed him quite a lot, as seeing as she knows the moves of Poison Sting, Peck, Double Kick, and Tail Whip, as Ash would think that those moves are quite handy, seeing as this Nidoran might be a few levels higher than, or a couple levels higher than his Bulbasaur. So it was quite a catch. So Ash would end up basically, Izuku would end up basically, letting both his Pokemon out so he can, form much more of a better bond with it. As, seeing Izuku do this, Ash would try to do the same. So yeah, in this case, they wouldn't have run into, Misty, because Ash wouldn't have thrown a pebble at Spearo's head. So yeah, no Flock coming after them, but with all that, we move. So they ended up walking over to Viridian City, and along the way, they ended up facing a few trainers, one or two trainers along the way, and Ash would end up catching himself his second capture, that being Caterpie, as he was quite happy with himself. As, they ended up going to the Viridian City and end up basically healing their Pokemon and resting them up. As well as they were doing so, suddenly a bunch of smoke entered the Pokemon Center, as Nurse Joy would start coughing, and so would all of them. As they see Team Rocket saying their, famous catchphrase, "Prepare for trouble and make it double." The theme, how they do it. But, they done that as, Jesse and James and a talking Meowth, which is quite surprising, would end up showing themselves. As Ash and, Izuku would be in awe, thinking, who are these people? As Nurse Joy would end up explaining who these people are, stating that they are in a criminal organization and they steal Pokemon and sell them and exploit them. As Izuku's heroic instincts from when he was basically in his other world, when he's seen criminals do similar things but to, animals and people and stuff like that, but we won't get into that. But we move. As Izuku's heroic instincts would end up helping him or making him make a stand, as Izuku would end up trying to send Bulbasaur, but he would stop and think, because he was battling with Bulbasaur the whole time, so he might not use Bulbasaur, as Bulbasaur would probably be tired. So instead of using Bulbasaur this time around, he would use Nidoran. As he would send out Nidoran, Nidoran would be itching for a fight, as Nidoran would basically, start kicking the ground ready, stating that it basically, symbolizing that it's ready for a fight. As, Jesse would look at this Nidoran and thinking, that's a pretty cool Nidoran you got there. It's feisty. Well, I'm gonna have to take that off your hands, pal, as she'd send out Ekans. As James would send out his coughing, saying, yeah, we're gonna take all of your Pokemon. So you better not, try to stop us. As he'd send out his coughing, as I said. As now it's a 2v1, so Ash would end up sending his Caterpie, as Ekans would intimidate Caterpie, as Caterpie would look quite scared. But Ash would, give him some encouragement and tell him that it's okay and that they could do this. as the battle ensues, it looks like Ash's Caterpie is on the losing end and it's about to go down, as Ash would encourage it. But even with Ash's encouragement, Caterpie would go down with a single bite, as Ash would basically call back Caterpie, telling it it did its best. As then he would send out his first capture, Pidgey, as he would tell Pidgey to use Gust on it. But Izuku would tell him that there's so many Pokemon and people here, he might injure one of them, as Ash would remember that there are people here. So he would tell Pidgey to stop and use Sand Attack instead, blinding Ekans, as Ash would would end up, blinding the Ekans, and it would tell his Pidgey to use Tackle and basically try and knock out Ekans. But on the other hand, Ash with his Nidoran, my mic, excuse me, but Izuku and his Nidoran would end up trying to basically battle Coughing, as Coughing would use like Smog and Smokescreen to try and blind their vision, as it was working, as Coughing would just go round and round using his Smokescreen to just continuously use Smog, as even though it wasn't really effective since it was a poison type move, it's still taking Nidoran's health little by little, as Izuku would start thinking of a strategic plan, as he would tell Nidoran to basically run out of that Smokescreen, as it would drag out Coughing as well, and as they do so, Coughing would end up trying to follow them and try to release another Smokescreen. But as they do so, Nidoran would jump back and use a double kick ordered by Ash, as this would land square on Coughing's head, as Coughing would fall to the ground, and this would be the perfect time, as Ash would call for a Tail Whip and then a double kick, with this time being more critical because the Tail Whip lowered Coughing's defense, as James would be in shock, thinking, isn't he a rookie trainer? As then Ash would tell Nidoran to run around in circles, as to try and make Coughing dizzy, and this really would, excuse me, I do apologize for my stuttering, but we move, as well, it ended up working because Nidoran's way more faster than Coughing, as this would work, confusing Coughing, as then Ash would call for another double kick, this time knocking out Coughing. As Ash would see Izuku winning his battle, he'd say, well, if Izuku's winning his battle, I have to win my battle too. As then he would call for another tackle, but this time Jesse was prepared and told Ekans to dodge to the right. Even though Ekans was a tad bit blinded, he would end up dodging, Ekans would end up dodging. As Ekans dodges, Jesse would call for a wrap, as Ekans would wrap its tail around Pidgey's leg, and now Ekans would slither closer and wrap around Pidgey's body, as Pidgey would yelp in pain, as Ash would tell it to try to break free, but it was no use, as Ash would be struggling with his battle. But since Izuku was already won his battle, he decided to help out Ash, his friend. So he'd end up going closer to telling Nidoran to go closer to Ekans, telling it to use Peck. As he does so, it would make basically Ekans flinch a little bit because it was a surprise attack. As then Pidgey would break free and use his tackle like Ash ordered, this time knocking out Ekans for good, as Jesse would be quite shocked by this revelation. So Jesse and James would end up running out of the Pokemon Center, telling them that this won't be the last time you see us, twerps, as Nurse Joy would thank them for basically protecting the Pokemon Center and stopping those Team Rocket criminals from stealing any more Pokemon. As then they would basically heal their Pokemon yet again, and on the next day they would leave for their first gym. And in the Viridian Forest, they'd end up meeting a few trainers along the way, and one of those trainers being that samurai guy, as the samurai guy would be talking about fighting other palette trainers, as those palette trainers actually actually take that back, they wouldn't have fought any other palette trainers yet because these two came early. So Samurai would be telling them that they're preparing for a battle and that they should have like a battle and fight, as Ash would be the first to battle him, seeing as, you know, he wanted to get his payback since he really didn't defeat Jesse on his own. He needed Izuku's help, so he decided to try take on Samurai by himself. And Samurai would send out his, well, Metapod, and Ash would send out his, well, Caterpie. And Ash, seeing this, would try and beat the evolved version of Metapod. And since Metapod only knows hard, and Ash would use a string shot and try and sling him around and around. This would end up working, as Metapod would lose to its lower evolution stage. But all of a sudden, an evolutionary light would shine off of, well, Caterpie. His Caterpie would glow and turn into a Metapod itself. Ash would scan the Pokedex, trying to figure out what just happened, and yeah, he found out that his Caterpie just evolved, turning into a Metapod. And it learned Harden, as Ash would be really proud of it and telling it praises and things like that. As then he would call it back, telling it had a good fight. As then he would, you know, show its Pidgey, or send out Pidgey. As then, Samurai would send out his strongest Pokemon, Pinsir, as Ash would be quite shocked by this. Pinsir, it looks quite strong and menacing with those big pincers it has. No pun intended. But yeah, Ash would be quite intimidated by this, but would, you know, keep rushing forward, telling Pidgey to use Gust, as Gust would be super effective against it, as it was blowing back Pinsir. But Pinsir would, you know, rush forward, ordered by Samurai to use Vice Grip to try and basically clamp onto Pidgey, as Ash would tell Pidgey to fly higher and then use Sand Attack. As he does so, he blinds Pinsir, and Ash calls for another, well, he calls for another Gust, and this time it would knock or blow back Pinsir. As Pinsir would be on its back, Ash would tell it to lay on a barrage of tackles from the sky. As he does so, Pinsir would end up going down, as Izuku would be quite impressed by this little tactic that Ash had, as so would Samurai. As so, Ash would end up beating Samurai, and, well, no Team Rocket this time, because, you know, they ended up going away. But yeah, and no Beedrill incident happening this time around. So yeah, we move from this, as they ended up going through the Verdant Forest, and Izuku would end up finding himself a rare Pokemon along the way, as it was, well, rustling in the bushes, as he would find himself an Eevee. And that's right, he's gonna get an Eevee. As well, Eevee would end up being hurt though, as its, you know, hind legs, one of its legs, is injured, as it was getting chased by a pack of Zigzagoons. Yeah, a pack of Zigzagoons. Yeah, you'd end up getting chased by a pack of Zigzagoons, as they, you know, just kept using tackle on it. Izuku would end up sending out Nidoran and Bulbasaur, scaring them away, as Bulbasaur would use a Razor Leaf and Nidoran would use Poison Sting, sending or driving the pack back. As well, Bulbasaur and, well, Nidoran would end up checking on Eevee, as Eevee would end up basically fainting, as, you know, Izuku would think, oh, this is dire, he needs to go to a Pokemon Center right away, as he'd end up doing so, rushing to the Pokemon Center in Pewter City, which was, you know, just maybe a few kilometers away, as Ash would run next to him, telling him that they'll make it in time, and he's sure of it, as, you know, they ran all the way to Pewter City. And as they arrived, they ended up going to a Pokemon Center straight away and trying to make sure if Eevee's alright, basically. And they ended up waiting a day or two, and, well, Nurse Joy came back telling them that Eevee will be alright and can make a full recovery, but Eevee has been hurt a lot by those wild Zangoose. Was it Zigzagoon? Not Zangoose. Zigzagoon. By those wild Zigzagoon, and would need time to recover. As well, Izuku would understand and would basically wait a few days, as Eevee would then make a full recovery and would basically see that Izuku would be right next to it and see two other Pokemon there as well, that being Nidoran and Bulbasaur. Seeing them right next to Ash, as not Izuku, but Eevee would be touched by this sentiment, as this trainer would help it just because it would help it for no reason, even though they've never met before. It helped it, so it kind of formed somewhat of a bond with Izuku in this time, as Izuku would wake up, seeing that Eevee was nuzzling up to it, as Ash would enter the room seeing this, and he would say, "Why don't you catch Eevee, and basically add it to your team?" As Izuku would look towards Eevee, asking if it would like to join its team, as Eevee would yelp its name, Eevee, as well. Izuku would smile happily, thinking that, well, I'll take that as a yes. So he takes out his Pokeball and basically, presses it up against its head, or Eevee's head, as Eevee would enter the ball with no resistance. The stars immediately show up, as he would celebrate with his two buddies and Ash, as he would end up getting his second capture, that being Eevee. As I think I'm just gonna leave it off here, and I will be releasing part 3 either tomorrow or maybe in a couple hours, but that just depends. But with all that being said, I'll see you all in the next What If. Peace.